Priscilla Cole, the founder and chair of the Geospatial Risk Summit, 29th and 30th of January 2025 in New York City. It's a huge privilege to have you on the Geospatial Index.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's get straight into it. Could you hit us with the elevator pitch for this summit?
Yeah, so this summit is focused on climate and physical risks in the private sector. Um, there was a recognition that when it comes to climate risk, physical risk, there's a lot of other conferences in the space of defense and intelligence and also in the academic space. Um, and there's not really a gathering place for the private sector at large. There might be like some other conferences, that pull together like insurance specifically, or like some of these other different categories. But this is a chance really to bring together a wide breadth of different industries and people that sit within it that are facing challenges from natural disaster and climate change as it goes in the future. And so recognizing that this covers insurance for sure, that are insuring houses and properties and things around natural disasters. But then it also starts to spill over into finance. You start to hit supply chain, energy, production and distribution, transportation. This is a big topic, and even healthcare. Thinking about the layout of our healthcare systems, and if those are serving people in natural disasters, or if they're vulnerable to those things, and do we have facilities and care where we need it as these things unfold into the future. So yeah, it's all about sort of breaking down silos and bringing together the people that have to deal with these challenges in sitting in industries, and also some of the data providers and analytics providers that are in the space of Earth observation and different sensor technologies. And it's a whole bundle of things that's needed to really keep eyes and monitor this stuff. It's a lot of big tech, big data kind of problems to solve.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a fascinating summit. I also like that you're touching on this very sort of current theme at the moment of quality of healthcare in the US. My next question is about the niche. That sounds like it might be a bit hard to nail down, but the theme I'm hearing at least is insurance.
Yeah, there will be a lot of insurance. I come from an insurance background. Some of the other, folks that were involved in the starting of this come from insurance. Um, yeah, so there will probably be a lot of insurance representation, although we sort of pride ourselves on being a bit anti-niche, if you will. Just saying whoever this touches, that's who should come. It's not siloed, into any one of these industries, and if there are folks that want to join in the conversation, yeah, they're welcome to come.
Great. So almost the point, and I just to show that I have read a bit of the materials on your website, it seems to be about cross niche conversations. Could you give a bit of commentary on the ideal attendee and perhaps what the story was in detecting their needs?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, especially from the standpoint of geospatial people. One thing that we were discussing is that you have all these companies that have sort of secret geospatial agents sitting within them.
My t-shirt
Yeah,
is
yeah, there you
topical.
go. Just like your t-shirt. Yeah, people who, either through their education or different things have had to deal with geospatial data, some people being experts, some people falling into it almost by accident. They're trying to solve a problem and realize that they can't solve it without bringing geospatial into the mix. So, even a lot of like data scientists and data engineers that become accidental geospatial people, right? And, there are people sitting in industry that have a wide breadth of titles. You would never, ever deduce that they had geospatial backgrounds. Like just looking at their titles, even like the last three titles sometimes on their profile page. Like sometimes you have to go like all the way, dig deep into LinkedIn, and, things like that to figure out that people have geospatial. Which I think recognizes the fact that geospatial data touches so many things, and it's so integrated into many different fields and topics, even without taking that name, like geospatial, geointelligence, GIS, whatever. There's so many different names to call it out specifically. But like if you're in these fields of, finance, insurance, supply chain, all the other ones that we listed, you're going to have to deal with the spatial components of these problems one way or the other, right? And so that's where identifying the ideal attendee is actually a really tough thing to nail down, and sort of being flexible and realizing that the ideal attendee might take many different shapes. Um, and there are some people even sitting up higher in the organizations that are not data people, they're not geospatial people necessarily, but they really have to manage all these different risks coming their way. I mean, you can't put blinders on when you're getting hit by natural disaster after natural disaster after natural disaster. You're sitting, at the top of a company with an MBA, you have to consider these things too. And so even if you're not an expert in dealing with that, like it still needs to be on your agenda.
Okay, so maybe just to summarize then, it's any individual with responsibility for mitigating risk in an organization where the location of things can help in resolving that. What is the skin in the game of yourself and others who are organizing it
Yeah, well,
in
this is,
terms of running this summit, to clarify?
yeah, yeah,
And more broadly, in terms of what brought you to it. Yeah.
it's maybe a secret, maybe not a secret, that I am the sole organizer at this point. I have a lot of other
So the skin in the
mentors
game
and
is all yours.
yeah, it's all mine. I actually didn't come up with the initial idea for the conference. I should throw some credit out to T-Bar, who's the director of geospatial at Verisk. Is the person who initially came up with the idea for this conference, recognizing the need. I actually did a little interview with T-Bar earlier about like where this whole concept came from, and T went all the way back to COVID and different things and their career and background and so forth that brought this together. But the conference needed a home. It needed someone to take it over and run it and do that daily grind that's involved in conference running. But I mean, in recognition that we really do want this to be something that goes on, more than just once. Like this is an important enough topic, something that people are really interested in, like it to be an annual thing. Maybe there will be, spin-off other sorts of webinars, like maybe, I don't know, I was on the phone with someone the other day that was saying like we should make it some kind of membership or like
Absolutely. That's what these
because
all turn into.
yeah, I mean, because this what it really feels like, honestly, is building a new community of people. Recognizing that there are many people sitting in lots of different places that are have interest or skin in the game in this topic, and this is the first chance to really bring these people together in one place.
Okay, and I understand that you quit your job actually to dedicate yourself fully to this summit.
Um, I- yes, I quit my job back in July. When I first quit my job, I made this bold statement that I was going to do a whole bunch of things. I was going to write, I was going to do all of this analysis. I did get some of that out early on, but like the third spoke in the wheel was also taking on this conference. That was probably a bit naive of me, thinking that I could keep all of that up all at the same time. And at some point, my life just got dominated by this conference. Which, if you've ever run a big event, yeah, it's a lot to run and put together something like this.
Yeah, so all credit to you, Priscilla. It's a brave move, and I think what you're doing here is displaying some leadership because a lot of us have in our minds, in the corporate grind, what it would be like taking the plunge like you have. So yeah, thanks for displaying some leadership.
Thank you. Yeah, and I should say also, it's a chance for me to figure some things out. I mean, I think like a lot of us, I was at a point in my career where, see all these needs out there, all these things that aren't being talked about, and try to figure out where best to situate myself and how I want to be a part of the conversation. I've been operating as an engineer, like on the technical side of things for a while, but I also have a policy background. I have this sort of secret master's degree in policy, and thinking about how to tie together all the threads on all these different things. Recognizing that like technology can help quite a bit in getting us out of some of these problems, but it's a lot bigger issue than just a technology one that has to be solved.
Okay, so I can't help myself. I'm noticing a pattern here with geospatial professionals that I interview from Manhattan. Because I've also had Gillian Malod on, and she also has a secret master's degree from Columbia that's related to policy in the sustainability space. And about this sort of career track that you mentioned, where you have to go 3 sort of positions back in LinkedIn before you see actually geospatial mentioned. Well, that's Gillian's story, and now she works for ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange, running amongst others the New York Stock Exchange. So yeah, it's interesting these patterns that come up, and yeah, the verification of them that you're giving.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's I could go pretty deep in this if you
Yeah,
if you want, Priscilla's theories on the world, what's happening here.
I'm very tempted. I'm very tempted. But let's get through the agenda and yeah, see what kind of foundation we lay here. Okay, so I guess last in terms of or second last in terms of the general questions to do with this summit. So what's been the popularity in terms of signups and interesting guests or speakers?
Yeah, so as mentioned before, it's just been easier in some ways to recruit from insurance. There's a lot of insurance up on in the speakers, that are up on stage, also in people that we're seeing register for the conference. But if you go to the website and see the speakers, I mean, there's a lot of different people who are coming. There's people who are in finance. There are people who are in supply chain topics and a lot of different companies coming together that are, startups and data analytics, some established companies in data analytics. One company that comes to mind that we have up on stage is Swiss Re, for example. Who
Another guest on the show in the past, yeah.
yeah, another guest on the show. What's really interesting about Swiss Re, like they are a well-known brand of insurance, but they're also trying to spin up this RDS product, which is everything but insurance. It's like the commercial space that have to handle risk and mitigation, in commercial areas that are not insurance, and they're spinning up this whole new thing, recognizing that a lot of the analytics that are useful for insurance are useful for different players in the commercial sector, and that's a real need, a real need that an insurance company is spinning up that kind of product for something that's not insurance, which is super interesting.
Yeah, that sort of brings us to the next sort of stretch of questions about applications. But I guess a general comment about insurance companies is that they employ some incredibly intelligent and capable people. So any products that they might spin out, I imagine, might be awfully useful. So yeah, it'd be interesting to watch what they do. Okay, so then continuing the insurance theme, in researching my episode with Spatial Risk Systems, another guest on the show, funnily enough, from Manhattan, I found out that Markel has lost money on natural catastrophe or NatCat insurance for several years. They even decided to stop writing that insurance, shifting it to another business line or subsidiary of the company. So how widespread is this problem? Can you expand on what they're getting wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, first to point out that Markel is far from the only company feeling the squeeze in this area. There have been, for some background, there's the New York Times has put out a whole series of articles about money that's bleeding out of insurance around natural catastrophe. There's also been some interesting articles in the Washington Post, even Wall Street Journal, picked up different things. And of course, if you're in these like insurance news, super nerdy insurance newsletters and newspapers and so forth, this is just a continuous theme.
I'm like a regular person in this space. I got my own WhatsApp group with a couple of Wall Street journalists. So.
Oh, very good, very good. Yeah, no, so there's, and going back to, there's this one particular New York Times article that I keep replaying in my head where they dug into data in the US looking at this widespread, I mean, and it's not just on the coasts, it's not just in the hurricane centers, it's not just in California with the wildfires, even, all across the country in many, many states. Insurance is almost not solvent in some places. Like the money bleeding out in claims, it is going out faster than it's coming in, and your inability to raise premiums to keep up with these trends. And there's a lot of finger pointing that's happening right now. um, in some states, in order to keep insurance affordable, there's been some really bizarre like laws and policy changes. Like, for California is like a classic example where um, their insurance regulatory people are elected, and they're elected in on these campaigns of like, oh, we're going to keep insurance low, and without really addressing the root problems of why the prices are going up, just come in running on these agendas of essentially price fixing. Saying that like you can't use natural catastrophe models to price your insurance, you can't price in the cost of reinsurance into the price of your insurance, and like kind of doing these schemes, which in my opinion help no one in the long run, of hiding the price of this product from the people who are buying it, and making insurers take the hit for these things. um,
And
and
so
at
you're
the
saying
same
the government regulation has a role to play in this difficulty?
Yeah, so I mean there's so many different things that go into play here. I mean there's, obviously like inflation, is a big deal and has caused prices to go up. There's also been a string and kind of a clustering of a lot of natural catastrophes that have happened in the last handful of years. These things can go in waves, but like the last, 5 or so years has been a particularly intense time. So you've seen a lot of claims going out. In response, there's been a tightening in the reinsurance markets, so that it's harder and harder and harder for insurance companies to get reinsurance. And if they get it, it covers less and the prices are more. I mean, the same kind of squeeze that individuals feel when they're going after, homeowners policies or things like that. Like insurance companies are feeling with their insurers, the reinsurance markets. There's also been in like the bond markets around insurance, there's been sort of everybody's been kind of scared and panicked, after, especially like starting after Hurricane Ian. Like there was a real like retraction of capital in those markets, and those markets really help to keep prices under control, and give more flexibility to insurance companies. um, there's been a string of articles about how climate change is responsible for this, pointing to like the intensity of natural catastrophes. And in my opinion, I think you do start to see signals that, disasters are intensifying, but I think it's more complicated than that too. I mean, there's also a lot of evidence that over the last handful of decades, people have been moving into riskier and riskier areas, concentrating risk in the areas where you expect to have natural catastrophes. And so when you have all of these things coming together, it's like this period of time is reached a real inflection point where it's just not feeling sustainable all the way around. Like you have too many people living in high risk areas. Insurance prices are going up through the roof. There's a lot of companies that have just decided to pull out of markets entirely. Like just saying we're not going to write in Florida anymore, or Louisiana, or California, or But then even more widespread than that, you have a lot of places where people are just not being renewed for their insurance policy. Like people in the middle of the country, not necessarily high risk, because insurance companies are looking at their balance sheets and just saying like, we have to unload some of this. Like we can't keep it on. We can't raise prices fast enough. And yeah, it's such an interesting web of things that are happening kind of all at once, and feeling the squeeze from so many different places.
That's fascinating. I can't help myself. I've got a provocative remark here. So I can't help but feel that these insurance companies, on the whole, have a lot of money. Often they would make a lot of money. And from my own limited market research in terms of the companies that are in the spatial finance sub-index of this overall geospatial index that I'm maintaining, I see, over the decades that this subset of companies has grown reliably and consistently quite well. And if you wanted to invest in them alone, you would do quite well as an investor. So overall, I feel that maybe it's a good thing. I mean, it's a bad thing to say, but maybe it's a good thing that some obviously adept set of business operators are struggling to make money in this context. And perhaps the fact that it's affecting them means that what they do to adapt and change and improve, systems, maybe government regulations and things like that, will be good for all of us.
Hmm. Yeah, well, one thing that I've observed myself in working in insurance is that insurance is, despite having a lot of data and, like what appears to be a lot of money, they're often not very sophisticated in um, bringing in new types of data and new types of techniques, and their tech stacks tend to be really behind the times. What you might see in other sorts of comparable industries, like in terms of like size and money and so forth. Yeah, and I think that there's a real opportunity to bring in geospatial data, Earth observation data, to really make that part of the daily bit of analytics and pricing that goes on inside of insurance companies. Because I think there's a lot of deals that go down that just feel very old school, like meet me on the golf course with, a brandy and, and like that's, like talk to my broker. I don't know. I mean, there's good and bad in some of those things, but, like making some of these decisions with big money based on real data and real analytics and, like being aware of what's happening and where risk is concentrating and like where are these hazards growing and so forth. This is what I mean when I say that it's a big data problem, because you've got to have a good handle on what your portfolio looks like and what it is and where it is. A lot of insurance companies are not that good at like really understanding even sort of that base, what makes up their portfolios, and then layering in on top of it like all of this, climate and natural catastrophe stuff. It's difficult to do, and a lot of
Right.
insurance companies like really have to step up, right?
I have to say I'm really surprised to hear that. And like, my more and more as I go through these episodes with the podcast, it's been 2 years now. But what I'm learning is that my role is to play the enthusiastic, but also enthusiastically naive outside observer on examples of the different sub indices that we come across. So as the enthusiastic, naive outside observer, it's really surprising to hear that an industry employing actuarials is accompanied by this kind of commentary that the default is not a data-driven, evidence-based sort of negotiation and deal-making process.
Yeah, I might get myself in a little bit of trouble here, but it's my,
Conspiracy
it's
of cartographers,
yeah,
baby.
right. It's my experience with actuaries that they're not trained in geospatial
Right.
anything at all. The most actuaries I've spoken to don't even uh, they don't even know that word geospatial or like
Fascinating.
any of its what's the word synonyms, right?
Yeah.
um
But
and
hang on, so
like
I'm going to cut in here.
yeah, sorry, go
Excuse me
ahead.
for being so rude, but we've fashioned ourselves a perfect segue. So continuing the last question, what are some examples of speakers that will help Markel, for example, make money on Nat Cat insurance? Again, speakers at the summit.
Yeah, speakers at the summit. I mean, I think, I mean, I mentioned, Swiss Re up there already, like, hearing, and there's Arch up on stage as well. Arch, also being in a lot of commercial property insurance and, having to think, it's really interesting both from like the residential and auto side, but also on the commercial side, like how you underwrite, Arch having products directly in private flood insurance. Um, that's not part of the National Flood Insurance Program, right? So they have to
And they
think
will,
about this stuff.
right, and
Yeah.
they will speak about geospatial providing illumination.
Yeah, yeah. So they'll talk about how they think about these problems, how they deal with them, like the kinds of analytics and data that they need to bring in to underwrite um, in a way that's going to work out for them so that they can, make money and not be surprised by natural disasters and so forth. Like understanding, like they use geospatial to understand, some of those things I was talking about earlier, like where their assets are, how they intersect with risks and hazards, and then, how to bring in historical, geospatial data and, and all of that. Like that helps them in their underwriting and their pricing and, understanding what they're taking on. And, I mean, I don't want to say that no company is doing this. It's not like no insurance companies are doing this, but, by and large, insurance companies are operating, kind of the way that they've always operated, where it's like, oh, does it sound like a good deal or not? Like, look at some statistics, like they get some advice from their actuaries, and then the underwriters make decisions that they want to make.
Okay, I can't, again, I can't help myself. You're inspiring me. So, there's a theme of entrepreneurship throughout this show. So, someone has to ask the question: what about an insurance startup which is geospatial at the core?
Right. There are some. Um, there are some. It's kind of an interesting time right now from my perspective of what's happening in the insurtech space. There was a big boom of insurtechs. There's been some struggles in that area. Like for a while, it was really hot for venture capital, to pour in, and then it retracted. And now I feel like we're in a new phase of maybe a reality check of what's there. These
Isn't
are
that the
hard.
adoption curve?
Yeah, right. Is
Trough of
that what I'm
disillusionment,
describing?
right? Okay, the
It-
plateau of whatever
yeah,
long-term
I think
value
we've just
extraction.
gone through a really hard trough. Maybe it's still continuing. I know I heard somebody's readout of the big InsurTech event out in Las Vegas about how this year finally felt like you got rid of some of the people that were just in it to make money and didn't understand insurance, and like this year felt more serious
Yeah.
with people who were there who actually wanted to like solve the problems and get companies. And yeah, it's a tricky thing because I feel like there was a wave of insurance companies that were trying to build things in-house. You definitely saw, the cycle of insurance companies hiring at a rapid clip, like a bunch of software developers and data engineers and data scientists, like trying to say, like, okay, we're going to build this in-house. Let's get it in. There's been a rise of different types of softwares that promise to be able to combine all these separate, tracks of things and analytics, and you pull it all in through APIs, and you can serve it in like one centralized, like Workbench or something for your team.
The
And you,
usual treatment. Yep.
yeah, and the usual treatment. And then you see a lot of, yeah, and to go along with that, you saw this huge pop up of insurtech companies, trying to get at some of these different things. What's interesting, talking about that trough of disillusionment, I've heard a lot of whispers about insurance companies that have now backed away from this idea of like trying to build it all in-house, or like maybe losing faith in some of these things that are supposed to like build a central platform and pull
Mm.
everything in. There was somebody that told me the other day that they have now embraced the idea of having like 15 windows open at the same time for different services, and they've completely given up on trying to integrate them
Just
together.
use whatever the platform specializes in the question you're trying to answer. But an example, I guess, of not a company not trying to build things in-house was the recent the acquisition this year of Fathom, a Bristol-based flood modeler by Swiss Re, which was yeah, as I said, we profiled Swiss Re on the podcast before, but that was because it was Fathom after the acquisition. So is that another route they can take? Is just to buy well-known bespoke boutique firms?
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see a lot of those kinds of mergers, acquisitions going on right now. I mean, there's some really interesting, like Near Map bought out Better View, Earth Daily. Well, okay, so first Descartes Labs bought Geosite, and then Earth Daily Analytics bought Descartes, like pulling all of those together. You see a lot of different movements happening right now because, I think in that cycle of like, a lot of VC money, a lot of companies, and now we're starting to see consolidation of that. And I think that there's going to be a lot more consolidation. I think that there's going to be either like the Swiss Re purchasing of Fathom type things where, large insurance companies might be pulling more of this tech in-house. Maybe tech companies are, pulling themselves together to rent out single solutions. I do feel like, especially in the start of 2024, it just seemed like there were way too many solutions, way too many things to license.
Yeah.
It starts to feel like, like how many Netflix accounts am I going to pay for to get,
Right.
different TV shows
Similar
streamed? Yeah.
blossoming of different channels. Okay, fascinating.
Yeah.
And what you're sort of showing to me is that acquisitions and those kinds of M&A deals are signals in and of themselves of themes in business and in a marketplace. So yeah, thanks for that insight. Okay, so what we're hearing so far is that the summit can be useful in terms of speakers talking about how they have added geospatial insight or analytics to a broader attempt to reduce risk. We've also heard around the edges that attendees can benefit from what can I say? Rumors, whispers, chatter, street talk in the industry, and I think that will be a huge benefit for attendees. But another one is the practical or workshop track. So continuing this theme, what are some examples of workshops that will help Markel, etc., et al., make money in the NatCat insurance space again?
Yeah. Yeah, the workshops are such an interesting wild card in all of this for me because the workshops are by and large being uh, taught by different, mostly smaller, like startup type companies that are in this space of, exactly what you were talking about. Like they're good at geospatial, they're good at doing analytics, they're good at big data. They want to, reach customers in insurance, in finance, in supply chain, et cetera, with the promise that their platform is best suited to this. But it's so curious because a lot of the people that are really good with data in this space don't know a lot about insurance and finance, and so there's a little bit of like smelling that there's a product in there somewhere to be sold, but like trying, they're trying as fast as possible to learn about these industries, to learn how they can build products to suit these industries. These industries are not uh, traditionally like very good at translating their needs into tech builds and so forth. And so there's education on both sides of the aisle, of the companies with the needs understanding how technology and data can fit those needs, and also the people who are trying to build solutions like coming together. And I think that maybe that's part of the audience that I didn't articulate. Like there are a lot of data and analytics providers and different types of companies coming to this event, partially because they're looking to find their customers, they're looking to
Yeah.
hear the needs, they're looking to hear, like, I think that a lot of them are hoping to hear in these conversations of like, okay, this is, because they're struggling to get the business requirements translated to them.
Yeah.
It's hard to draw that out. People don't know how to communicate in that, like, okay, here are the business requirements for this software build, and so they're coming to hear the needs so
Yeah.
that they can build better technologies there. So it's like this real meeting of, like the people in industry that have all these problems, they're trying out different solutions. Solutions are like being acquired and ripped out from under them as fast as they can pick them up. And
Yeah.
then, there's companies on the other side that, have are trying to find these markets and trying to find, how they can serve them.
Okay. All right. So I got a couple of things to say here. So what you've just been saying endorses the common agenda item I have for all of the episodes where I'm profiling businesses on the podcast. One of them is what's your ideal customer and how do you ensure you're always working backwards from their needs? And this kind of a summit, you're saying, is a common way or a way. It's a channel of information for these companies to acquire more understanding about those needs. Another thing I have to say is I think I saw that one of the workshops is run by Wherobots.
Yeah.
So this wasn't by design, Priscilla, but you're helping me understand something that's totally unintentional. But I feel like right the way through all of the guest speakers' themes relate to, or I'm able to talk about a guest that I've had on because Whereabouts has also been on this show. It's fascinating. Anyway, this is not about promoting my own podcast, but I feel like at least there's some sort of endorsement that I've been able to keep up with the industry. I can relate a lot of the guests and topics to people that have come on. So have you got any comments about what Whereabouts might want to say, or another workshop just to help people judge the value of this summit?
Yeah, so Whereabouts is one of the presenters in the technical demos. kind of a headlining sponsor, and they are coming specifically to show a workflow for doing risk analytics in insurance using their
Perfect.
platform, pulling together a whole bunch of geospatial data and showing some practical applications for that. I think in this demo, I think they're showing a fire demo. They might be showing flood as well. I mean, it's in some ways it's kind of like pick your peril. It doesn't really matter. It's like an example of pulling together a bunch of like big geospatial data that's very hard to crunch on like your individual laptop. Like you really need some more advanced computing for this, and showing off a workflow, start to finish, of like how you can actually perform meaningful risk analytics for insurance that they can use in decisions for underwriting or pricing, or both.
Okay, and I think I saw that Helen McKenzie, who's this superstar geospatial advocate for Cardo, will also be there.
Yeah. Yeah, Helen is coming as well, and Cardo is another sponsor. And so yeah, I don't I hope that it's not going to be just like, hey, my platform's better, hey, my
Right.
platform's better, hey, my platform's better. I'm hoping that there's a bit of a meeting of the minds of like showing, because I think part of the message is that it's not good enough to just like hire a couple of analysts and expect that they're going to fix all these problems for you. Like this is big data, these are big problems. The analytics are really intense, and getting it all the way down the line to some kind of something that an underwriter and actuary could open up and use and understand what's happening. Like that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, both in like the data engineering side, and also software engineering, and what does that look like, what does the platform look like, what does the product look like. And so these companies are coming to show off their platforms and products, but what I'm actually hoping will happen is sort of like a bigger conversation about like why these products are needed in the first place, and like how big this data is, how like maybe they'll learn from each other, maybe new partnerships will come together.
That's what
The
I'm keen
people,
about. Yeah,
yeah, the people coming will understand better like what their different options are. Maybe some of the people who are consumers of these things will have some like real feedback for the companies that are building them, of like, hey, it does this, but really I kind of need it to do that to be helpful. Like, and I'm hoping that there's some critical uh, dialogue that happens.
absolutely. And I'm also thinking, because one thing that came out of an encounter I had with the indoor navigation and mapping subindex with Navigene was them sponsoring a monthly news digest. And that's another way to consistently get the word out about the interplay between geospatial and risk mitigation, for example. So yeah, I'm personally quite keen to come along and see what kind of potential there is for that to serve this emerging combination of industries, maybe best way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So yeah, last couple of questions here. So what is something that AI can do in the geospatial field for insurance that human intelligence cannot?
Oh, I don't. I feel like this is again where I'm a bit controversial in here. One thing I will say that's true of AI and anything else, if you don't have good data going in, you're not going to get anything good on the end of it. Um, I think sometimes I think that there's a little bit too much enthusiasm of how AI is going to magically solve problems when we haven't really fixed the data part of the equation. I'm actually hopeful with AI that it can help with the data side of the equation, of getting better information to start from. Like when it comes to especially satellite imagery, like getting the most that you can get out of that imagery and translating it into real data, that can be used, further down the line. And maybe the consumer of that is like another AI operation to take that all in, but like really fine tuning like where those assets are, and what they're made out of, and how they were constructed, and how after a disaster rolls through, like you know, um, doing a better job of qualifying and quantifying the damage that you see, so that you really understand, in closer to real time impacts that happen. And there's, kind of this weird quandary right now where there's a lot of satellite data, and so little of it ever gets analyzed or used in anything. Like there's just this overproduction of data, and then it doesn't really get consumed. And I think AI could help with some of that, of like creating better, cleaner, tighter, faster data sets that are ready to push into some of these other things.
Yeah, so that continues a theme actually of the last episode with SIA AI, where Alex Wagner from Houston came on, although SIA AI is another Manhattan-based geospatial company. I love the concentration of companies from this location, speaking of geography, on this episode. What we discussed there was an amplitude change detection algorithm on synthetic aperture radar data without a human eye looking at these satellite data returns, running an algorithm over it to detect that change, to then perhaps having a human further down the processing pipeline understand what this change might be and whether it's a false positive, for example. And I think actually there's insurance or risk more generally applications for this, because if you have an insurance policy that offers a payout when there is flood, well, there might be evidence on the surface of inundation by water, which might come up in an ACD or amplitude change detection analysis, for example. You have a remote sensing background, as I understand, or played a bit in that space. Does ACD come up at all, or has it come up at all in your understanding of how geospatial is done for insurance?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I should state, so I did take a remote sensing class in grad school. That was, like an important, and then I sort of put it down for a while, but my last employer was ISI, which is also a SAR satellite company. Yeah, and so there's a lot of hope for different types of satellite information. SAR being very good at detecting changes in elevation and texture. Kind of very optimized for that, which is really helpful to see. Areas that are covered by water. It's helpful to see. If there are changes. If you had a building and now it's a pile of rubble, or you have something that's blown down. SAR can be very helpful in detecting that. And certainly there is space to tighten that up, to be able to see things better, to see things faster, to really understand. SAR is very complicated. It's not something that you could just see with your eyes and understand what's happening. Like it requires an awful lot of computing to sort of make sense of these signals that are coming back. And for sure, that area, there's lots of room for continued improvement to get better. And the hope is that, one day there will be enough, SAR satellites up in space that you can essentially watch whatever you want, whenever you want, to be able to see damages or changes happening in real time, for all sorts of assets. And you could think of that being helpful in insurance markets, to understand natural disaster effects. You can think of it, there's a lot of interest in like electricity lines and things like that, like seeing where things are blown over. If you're watching dams or bridges or different shifts, like seismic activity. There's all sorts of applications,
So
even going into, yeah, defense and intelligence too.
Yep. So again, continuing my habit of linking this back to previous guests, so we can talk about Umbra, and Gabe came on the show when I profiled that synthetic aperture radar company. We can talk about Spot It. You mentioned power lines. Spot It is a company that takes this remote sensing or Earth observation data and runs it through a computation engine, basically, to automatically detect issues along power line routes. I feel this summit will be hugely useful for the person that deliberately attends to cause these conversations about analytical needs from those who cannot presently judge risk effectively enough. There's a lot of potential, I think, for attending this summit and having those conversations. Okay,
Yeah.
and also I want to say, actually, the point of the AI question across all of these episodes is to have the audience here industry insiders thinking critically about it. So I appreciated the critical answer you gave. All right, so I've got a cheeky question to end on. It's brave of you, as I mentioned before, to quit your job to run a 2-day summit. Is this all secretly a giant reverse interviewing method to choose who you will work for next?
It is. It's not it's not so secret. Yeah, no, I mean, a big return on investment for me is that I get to have conversations on a daily basis with big companies, small companies, startups, thought leaders, and I get to hear what people are building, where the markets are going, what people are worried about, like where, these next trends are. I have such an ear to the ground for all of these leading indicators, in several different industries. Like it's not just insurance, although I am very interested in insurance. Um, yeah, and a stated goal that I've said out loud a few times is that it is my hope that I will not have to open up, something and apply for 50 jobs or, or whatever. I'm hoping that these jobs will find me, just in relationship building and everything that happens behind the scenes in putting on an event like this.
Yeah, so again, Priscilla, you are an incredible example of what a leader looks like in our industry. You're providing such a fantastic example of initiative and paying it forward. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been fun to come on and tell this story.
All right, have I earned the right to attend?
Yes.
All right,
No, I'd
absolutely.
love to have you attend. I'd love, I don't know. I'm like, here, let's plan out 5 new podcast episodes. We're gonna, hit on these different themes. We're gonna dig into them. You're gonna help me, like, what did you hear? Like, there's so much information. It was so good. Like, let's break it down.